We have drifted so far away from what makes us human and how we are supposed to eat, how we are supposed to move, live, our light environment, everything. I'm not advocating for us going back to living in caves and eating, a woolly mammoth that was just freshly slaughtered down the street. Like I know we can never go back to that, but I'm trying to hearken us back to a time when we didn't have chronic disease rates at all. Our life expectancy was actually pretty good if you got past a certain age, because if you weren't, killed by an animal, you actually did live a very long life. That's another one of those incorrect arguments where people say, why would you want to, our ancestors only lived to age 30. No, that was their average lifespan because infant mortality was through the roof. So that skewed the numbers. There were plenty of people that lived into their 80s and 90s and further and if you look at some tribes around the world that are still relatively untouched by Western society, although nobody is completely untouched, you still see that. So I just want to bring us back to that, to real foods, to real, movement. Exercise in a gym just mimics the hunt or the gather, right? That's why we do that, because we don't move around very much anymore. And all of those things. I'll make a pitch for something that I just put out today, this video that I just made on saturated fat. That's one of the biggest ones. If I went out on the street with you today, Frank, we did it, quite frankly, man on the street. Saturated fat, good or bad? What do you think the percentage of people that would say it's bad?
Most of them.
Yeah, 90, 95%.
Yeah.
And I just did a whole big video on this, including breaking down Dietary Guideline Committee members' FOIA requests. There was a FOIA request on the 2015 Dietary Guidelines Committee where they're batting back and forth. How do we sort of spin this to the public, full well admitting that there's no evidence to support what they're recommending? It was fascinating. This was a paper from I want to say it was 2018 or so. So it's not even new, but I had never seen it before. And when I went through the paper, I found the citations and I went to the citations, and you can download the FOIA documents. It was hundreds of pages. And I was reading it like it was a page turner. I was like, this is wild. These are people from Harvard, people from all over talking about we got to be careful because the Wall Street Journal is putting out an article about saturated fat and they're going to raise that whole debate again. And we should really get out ahead of this. Not is the science solid? Do we know this? It's they even talked about one paper where they were this flies in the face of all of our recommendations, and they bullet pointed it. And one of the Dietary Guideline Committee members says, well, we have a deadline for publication, and this paper doesn't meet that publication. We can just not include the paper. And that's what they did. I went through the 2015 Dietary Guidelines, control Fing for that author to find the paper, see how they handled it. And they handled it by not handling it. Like Building 7. Right? Just don't talk about it. That's and
now, but is that because of big saturated fat lobby or big unsaturated fat lobby, or is it because of just pride?
It's a mixture of everything, and you can even see it in some of the documents. But for a big part of it, people don't realize the sugar industry paid Harvard scientists to shift the focus away from sugar and onto dietary fat. Okay. And then the American Heart Association was essentially brought into being by Procter & Gamble. Who sold vegetable oils. And so the American Heart Association was very happy to recommend polyunsaturated fatty acids, seed oils, because they improve your heart health. Well, they lower cholesterol. Whether that actually improves heart health is a whole other animal, right? And I do get into that a little bit. But this is so important. And you're like, well, why are we just talking about this one thing? Because it's critical, because every cell in your body has a lipid bilayer that's made up of fats. So the fats you consume, the quality of the fats you consume, and the quantities you consume dictate cell function. And when cell function starts to degrade, cancer, diabetes, Alzheimer's, every disease that is plaguing modern man can be traced to fatty acids specifically. So I think it is unbelievably important. And I even, I said, this is one of the most important videos I've ever made. It's 14 minutes. But I said, I just think you should see what the experts knew behind your back, and you've been lied to. And you don't have to believe me. You can see it in their own words, but at least question the fact that, Frank, I was on here, showing you that life expectancy chart, right? We're not going in the right direction. So when outlets like The Atlantic or whatever write an article, damning the Maha movement, it's are they perfect? No, but they are for the first time, we have an HHS secretary who's trying to do the right thing. And I give him a ton of credit, because can you imagine the bureaucracy that he is pushing against, the decades-long, Goliath that is just, the inertia must be incredible. And he's just like,
Yeah.
no, I'm going to fire the entire CDC vaccine panel. I mean, that caused quite an uproar, right?
Yep.
But how are you going to start over if you don't start over? And I just applaud what he's doing.